Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Phoenix Gaming. I am your host Nick Henning and today we are doing the Azul 2024 World Series of Board Gaming Championship commentary. This is only a 3-player final, which I believe is the first time for Azul that they've actually only had a 3-player final. I'm not well versed enough in Azul to know the significant difference of 3-player and 4-player, except for to the extent that you have more control over the flow of the game in 3-player than in 4-player. As you have significantly more control in 2-player versus 3-player and so on and so forth. So I do think that means that the players are going to be jockeying a little bit more for what their opponents are doing in this game. So hopefully we can keep an eye on that. We've got Hung in seat 1, who's in the bottom right here, Allan in seat 2 in the bottom left, and Bailey at the top and Lonesome in seat 3. We're starting right here with the first action. We can see that Hung is grabbing a pair of blues. I'm going to name right up front that Hung is a longtime personal friend of mine. And so I'm going to demonstrate an extreme bias as we're going through here in terms of who I'm rooting for. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and run the video. 2 blues is a nice, good starting spot in terms of like it's relatively central to the board. And closes that out right away. Doesn't necessarily give away anything super great in the 1 slot here, because that single yellow there might be what Allan's looking at to make sure that he leads for the next turn. There's nothing else super juicy out there, but yeah, I mean, the single yellow is pretty good. It's relatively central, but we think he's probably not going to get double blues, so he's probably looking to either go left or ideally right and get 2 yellows and head into the center there. So it'd be ideal for him to avoid that. Bailey makes an interesting choice here and takes the 2 blacks, which is not what I would have expected. I would have expected to grab the 2 yellows straight into the center of the board. I can't quite see yet. They're going to move the player videos where those 2 blacks got dropped for Bailey, but it looks like it's maybe in row 4 or 5 even. Kind of a long-term speculative plan there. Maybe Bailey is seeing, row 4. So Bailey's maybe seeing those other double blacks over on the right side there and thinking, oh, that they can grab that. I don't know why grabbing the blacks early is important here. I'm not quite sure about that. Hung sort of sets up his little row right there, but makes for a pretty juicy pot in the middle here. Allan's got sort of an interesting decision in that I think most would want those 2 yellows, but then he's going to be setting up a lot of triples in the middle. So that really sets Bailey up for some good plays, and I think it's probably not what he'd be inclined to do. So consideration has to be given to maybe taking the 2 whites or teals or whatever you want to call them. Maybe placing them in row 2 or in row 3. But instead, Bailey says, you know what? I'm just going to grab the 2 reds. I don't really mind that the yellow and the reds here are not even connected diagonally. That's really, really interesting. I know that Allan's a super strong Azul player, so he's seeing something in the long term here. Maybe he's seeing that he can grab the triple yellows and then connect the reds to the yellows there and just kind of be concerned about that side. He's also making it so that he can basically touch everything on the board. He's going to maybe cost himself a point or 2, but it means that in future turns, he really doesn't mind what's happening so much. Bailey's going to grab the pair of teals here and stack them above the speculative black spot there, so that he kind of work his way up the board. But Bailey's got a lot of work to do this turn to make sure that these score in the right way. So again, I'm not fully sure why this is Bailey's long-term plan here. I think that there's sort of a speculation that they'll be able to grab maybe the 2 row and the 1 row on the way, so not having to work too hard for it. And Hung straight up ruins their plan by taking the 2 blacks. 2 blacks are kind of diagonal to their spot, but it is going to kind of sequester Hung to the left side of the board, making Hung pretty stuck in terms of what he's going to need next turn. He's looking for a lot of teals to come out next turn, and that might end up stymieing him if the flips are not favorable. That being said, usually at the beginning of the game, people aren't taking that many teals, so might be that Hung just kind of has his run of the pack there, but he is certainly committing a lot more than, for example, Allan, who's going to score some fewer points but has a lot more flexibility. Allan says, I'm going to set up those triple reds. That's fine by me. I really need these triple yellows that we talked about before, making sure that he's got kind of a strong anchor spine on at least one of the 2, 3, or 4 rows, which is going to make it so that his scoring gets higher in the early game than it would be without having that strong spine. Triple reds here also not so exciting for Bailey, as it's kind of locked up all of his spots. I think Hung is pretty happy at those triple reds because he could drop it in the fourth column there below those blacks that he's got set up. So not too terrible for him. Bailey needs to be careful about not giving him that fourth red, but otherwise has some flexibility. I could see Bailey just grabbing a single teal here, going for the 3 slot, but Bailey's also got to consider, like, what am I doing in terms of my 2 furs? Given that other players have filled their 2 slots, it's possible that Bailey will be able to just pick up a 2 fur from stuff that gets dropped into the middle, maybe even a pair of blues, because there's blues on all the outer factories, I guess is the right term there. So I do think that Bailey can be patient in terms of the 2 slot. It is an interesting question about whether the 3 reds in the bottom row there kind of connects to the whole set. But I think this is going to be a lot of stuff that Bailey is not finishing on turn 1. A lot of handcuffing going into turn 2. So we're going to see if I'm wrong about that. But I do feel like Bailey is setting themselves up to be in a trap in future turns, or specifically the second turn, and having to worry about how that's going to look for them. Hung just says, I'm going to complete the set right here. It does sort of prevent the Reds plan that we were talking about there. So there is an advantage for Bailey having kind of stopped or slowed Hung's setup here. And Hung says, that's fine. I'll just kind of develop my board a little bit here. I think what Allan wants most is a single yellow, but setting Bailey up with a pair of blues is not great. So he might take something from the center of the board to kind of like slow Bailey's roll. Like I could see taking just a single blue from anywhere and putting it in the 4th slot, knowing that's what he wants in his 4th slot eventually. It's very slow, but okay. We're seeing what Allan's seeing. 800 rated Azul player here. We're feeling good about ourselves. I'm pretty proud of that. My default mode would be just to grab the yellow, but I think he's got time. He's not concerned that people are going to take those yellows out from the board underneath him. So stymieing the player to his left, who's already kind of like locked in weird positions, I think is going to be pretty good. Bailey here, I'm back in this spot where I think taking probably the teal and clearing out that 3rd row is sort of the ideal situation. Bailey does not look happy with the way that these things have shaken out. And I don't blame them. Going through your first turn, missing a 1 and 2 slot is rough. They have a lot of tiles claimed, maybe even the most tiles claimed, and they're in 4th seat. But ultimately, tiles placed, right, that actually go onto your board is what really matters. There's this sort of, I think, obsession with, I would say, like mid-level Azul players of like, ooh, I can get my really hard rows finished early, the 4th and 5th rows. And sometimes that works out really well, but you're also going to get stuck in this situation like Bailey is right now and have to advance. So Bailey says, I'll just grab, I'm aware that I want to be scoring this top easy row. I'm going to grab the red here because it goes right in the middle. I don't really have to make any specific plans about it, and I can then figure it out next turn. It also opens up what kinds of colors they're looking for next turn, right? Blacks, reds, now yellows connected to the reds. So a lot of diversity in terms of the colors that Bailey is going to be looking at next turn, which is going to at least make it so that their game plan of being a little bit stymied on the number of tiles they'll be able to take in turn 2 actually mitigated by the diversity of the tiles that they're going to be able to take. It's the main reason actually why you want to be playing into the middle, so you can take a lot of different stuff. So Bailey is solving that problem a little bit by saying, look, I'm going to have a lot of other connecting stuff along the way as well. Hung here's got a tough choice. Nothing's too exciting. The pair of teals is probably best, but he's going to put him in row 4 here, and I think that's really going to hurt him. This connects to absolutely nothing that he has. He's not going to finish this turn. He's going to be stymied on it for next turn. I don't know what else he would have taken, though, because there's really not a lot left on that side of the board that he's excited for, so maybe he's just stuck taking these teals anyway. I can't help but wonder if the teals maybe should have gone in the 5th row instead. It doesn't solve any of the problems that I just said, but acknowledging that he's more interested in getting 4 reds next turn than he is in like setting up the 5 yellow slot, it might be a little bit more flexible for him to have put that in the 5th slot. It's really tough to say though. Allan's happy to take the single yellow now and close out that third row. I think taking a blue would be fine, but by taking and closing out, he's just ensuring that his opponents aren't going to get cheeky with taking that single yellow. It's entirely possible that, Bailey would have grabbed one of those yellows, thrown it in slot 2, kind of hope to make good with that. A single blue grab here for Bailey is going to go into slot 2. I don't love this. He knows he's not going to get the other blue back. Allan is going to take it. Hung is going to take the teal here. So Bailey's going to be stuck in a position with 4 unfinished rows on turn 1, which is going to be pretty devastating. I don't think there's any world in which Hung doesn't just take the teal here. I guess he could take the blue to slow Allan down, because he's going to wheel something back, but he's not going to get the teal back then. So he could shoot himself in the foot for a point to also hurt his opponent. I don't think that's worth it. I think that just taking the teal is probably the safe play here. I think that Bailey was supposed to take the teal. If Bailey takes the teal and clears out that third slot, yeah, Allan might get 2 blues, but I don't think that being stuck in 4 slots like this is a very good position for Bailey to be in. The block of it is not worth. And Bailey has no room next turn. It's going to be either taking piles and negatives, can literally only take 6 tiles next turn. That is, Bailey got to the final in a game of Azul, so I'm sure is a very skilled player. But the way this first round has gone has been, I think, an absolute disaster for Bailey. Playing at this table, right off the bat, my instinct is that Hung and Allan are miles ahead. Given the flexibility here, and of the first round, I like Allan's position more. He has a bit of an awkward in that his second column and fourth column are, of course, separated by the third column. So mildly less in terms of point scoring connectability compared to Hung here. But definitely more in terms of having flexibility of where to place, whereas Hung's position, which is a little bit more connected, right? There's no difference between his second column, second row, and his first column, third row. He only needs those teals there, but he has really stuck himself on the left side of the board. He's really in need of teals. He grabs the single yellow here and throws it in the 5th row, which is tough. That's the kind of thing that really is going to stymie his flexibility in the future, but he probably wants to finish this column, but he has a lot of needs now because he needs to finish the teal, then 4 reds, then ultimately clear out the yellows. In the long term, it's not necessarily awful, but I think I would take the 1-point hit for the flexibility. That's what I've seen people doing in the other Azul final tables. So can't help but feel like that is going to come back to haunt him. But let's find out if that's actually the case. Bailey not looking happy. And rightly so. Yeah, and Allan's also got the fourth column, fourth row and fourth column set up to score nicely and easily next turn. Both Hung and Allan are gonna reap the rewards of Bailey's super awkward board. Really, probably Hung more than anything else. So Allan's gonna have to be really careful about what he passes to Bailey, because if Bailey says, "Well, screw it, I can't take that," there's not gonna be any real blocking plays from Bailey coming into Hung's row here. So Allan's gonna need to make sure that he's pretty careful going into the round. Allan's going first here. I think that probably moving into the middle is good. I see those 2 yellows there. That is likely a high priority target for him. He wants to see a lot of blues this round. If he can get the 3 blues and the 4 blues knocked out this turn, I think that would be a dream. Probably too much to actually hope for given what we're seeing out here so far. There we go. Lots of extra blues, just as I was saying that. So I think I just manifested for Allan, because the other players are not that interested in blues. We can see exactly what it is that Bailey's going to be claiming. Very awkwardly, no double reds. So he's going to have to kind of slow roll that process a little bit. And, singles in the things he's looking for, but those, lots of no triples either. I'm trying to I'm stumbling because I'm trying to look at all this information at the same time. Yeah, lots of different things there. I think that Allan, if he wants to ensure that he doesn't go last next turn, is looking to take something that will leave Bailey without good options on the first turn. That being said, he's going to say, I want the 2 yellows. He pushes these guys into the middle. And I think Bailey is then going to take the teal and go first. No, Bailey says, I really want the single blue. There's 2 different options for single blue, so it's interesting that that's a snap take for him. I would have taken the single teal for going first next turn. He wants to clear his whole board. They want to clear their whole board this turn. Hung says, great, I love teals. Teals are my dream. Teals are what we've been talking about. And I'll go first next turn. I do wonder if that's supposed to go in slot 3. I mean, maybe actually, I guess Hung is actually really not too concerned about opponents taking teals out from underneath him. But that's the slot 3 is better for him because the only thing he wants in slot 3 right now is teals. And so I do wonder if instead of grabbing the maximum point scoring, which he did in row 2 here, if he puts it in row 3 and then awkwardly tries to finish out his 2 third and fourth row teal columns, he can grab the 2 yellows in slot 2, which are there. We know that it's very unlikely Allan's going to take those yellows. We know that it's very unlikely that Bailey is going to take those yellows. So there's a good chance those wheel around. So I do wonder if heading out in that direction would have been good for Hung in the long term here. Allan here looking, there's a couple double blue options. He's not in a big race with the blues, so he really can take his sweet time. But if he wants to press the blue issue in terms of getting the triple blues, then he's going to have to grab the double blues right now. The problem that he has is that Hung is fine taking a single blue. So that's something that he's going to have to pay attention to if he is setting up a triple blue play. He also would be perfectly content with a triple red play. So maybe just kind of like flooding the board would be an option. He grabs the double blues that set up for some yellow options here. I think this puts Bailey in a position of probably just grabbing those double reds before they get a little bit more polluted and dropping them in the bottom row. A single teal is setting up lots of triples, which I don't think is necessarily valuable here. Could grab the single black and just kind of like plan to sort of like slow roll a little bit. That would be another option. Yeah, I mean the single he doesn't want the blacks to like get polluted either. So looking at what my opponents are doing, Hung might be finishing out his teal there. Not sure what he's doing in his triple slot. He's going to probably try to grab some of those yellows. Maybe he'll grab the pair of yellows out of the middle to get up to 3, since he's kind of gotten that flexibility, or left himself the flexibility by placing the 2 slots. So that might be where I'm seeing Hung take his actions. A single black with a push into the middle. So Bailey is setting up a triple red on purpose. Okay, I see what's going on here. Bailey is essentially forcing Hung's hand because Hung doesn't really want to leave a triple red to Allan. It's like the dream basically for him, right? It's not as good as the triple blues, but a triple red is pretty nice here. And so he's forcing Hung's hand by saying you could take this bad triple red, put it in your triple red spots just on the other side of the world for you, which is okay for Hung, but not the best. I actually think that if I'm in Hung's spot here, I'm maybe a little bit too petulant to play Azul, but I'd consider taking that single teal as him and putting it in slot 4, saying, you know what? Yeah, Allan's going to get the 3 reds. That's fine. I'll give him a negative along with it. But we'll just sort of flood the board with stuff. The other problem with that I'm seeing right now is that there's basically no player who can really realistically claim these triple blacks if they go out there. Hung actively doesn't want them. Bailey would take them for negative points and put them in slot 1. And then Allan, again, just in this flexible position, could throw them into the 5th slot. It's not really the best for them. So he does something very similar to what I was suggesting, but instead grabs the single blue. So he does flood the board with that extra red like we were talking about. But he says, I want to actually maximize my score here. Again, I'm actually not a huge fan of this. I think he'd actually be better off grabbing a single red, because that blue's going to score. There's then the gap where the teal is that he's filling in. So he's actually leaving some points on the table. Ideally, the grab for him this turn would be the red. Of course, you don't always do just the ideal thing at the cost of 1 or 2 points, but it does cost him 2 points playing the blue this turn instead of next turn, because he doesn't get the point for the teal and the black that he's already got set up there. So that is something to pay attention to with those diagonals, is that this is not the ideal turn to be playing that blue. I'll just repeat myself over and over. Allan here says, perfectly content to, instead of taking these reds, take these teals, throw them in the 5th slot here. That goes right below the thing. So that is a disadvantage of the action that Hung set up. And this is a mess now for the both of them, because Bailey can grab that single teal. All of a sudden, Hung can't grab the single teal. And that 4th slot is going to continue to be locked up for him. So I think grabbing that single blue actually has really come back to haunt Hung, in that, like I said, it's not the most ideal scoring. It is actually a pretty good setup for Allan, who's perfectly content to take the 4 teals. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a little bit of a tunnel vision on, Allan will take the 4 reds. But then again, who can take the reds right now? I think Bailey could consider taking the 4 reds, taking the 2 negatives, and putting it in the 5th slot, which I don't think would be bad, but also means that Bailey's not gonna finish out the teal row here. I do think this is a dangerous get for Bailey, because if Allan decides to take those 5 reds, Bailey has very little left to do. Although, actually, I guess at this stage there just aren't that many actions, so there aren't that many negatives that are going to be claimed. So I do take that back. Yeah, I think Hung walked himself into a trap here. I think Hung is probably stuck taking 2 yellows at this stage. No one else wants to take the 2. That's not true. Bailey would take the 2 yellows and put them in the top. Yeah. Hung is about to walk into a bomb, because if he takes the yellows and Allan takes the reds, then Hung is basically stuck taking negatives. I think Hung takes the central yellows. Well, it doesn't really matter. Hung takes the yellows. Allan takes the reds. Or maybe the blacks and puts them in slot 1? No, I think he takes the reds and puts them in slot 3. Bailey takes the yellows and puts them in slot 1. Hung takes the blues and puts them in slot 3. Probably where we're headed. It puts Hung in a position that he really wants to get a red in slot 1 and the yellows in slot 2 next turn, but the 3 blues are setting up for the 3 blues is not bad. It again lends a little bit more to it would have been really nice to get that 3 slot of teals. He's the fact that he's kind of worked into the side of his board and now things are going out kind of crooked. He's not able to play into the middle. This is going to come back. He can't take the blacks. They have nowhere to go. He could take the reds just as kind of a blocking maneuver here, and then essentially plan to take the 2 yellows as his next action. That would be the other option for Hung, right? Is that instead of taking the 2 blues, he takes the 5 reds. It's going to cost him 3 points, because I think he's already got a negative for the 1 tile. But then he should be pretty good otherwise. I think I don't think that all the yellows are going to be gone. So he'll be safe on the next action. So this line is a little bit more, it's a little bit more painful right now. It's a little bit less good for Allan, but only a little bit. Allan's, I think, probably content to take the blacks and throw them in slot 1 up there. Or yeah, Allan would just take the blacks and throw them in slot 1 up there. I do think that the reds are better for him in slot 3, but the difference for Allan is relatively marginal at this stage. So Hung says, I don't want to go for the red play. Oh, Allan snap takes the blues instead. Oh, I see. He grabs the blues because no one can, if Bailey doesn't take the reds here, he's going to get the reds back Yeah, interesting. He really saw what his opponents were going to do. He grabs the yellows. Yeah, wow. That's such a great big brain play by Allan, who already had it figured out. Oof. Okay. All right. And so Hung's going to take a couple negative points here by grabbing these reds, but that'll clear out the row. And Bailey is content to grab essentially whatever is left here. Now, if Bailey had instead taken the reds, I guess there's 3 of them. So, or there would have been 3 left over. So that'd be a lot of negative points. It wouldn't be placing in slot 1. No, I do think the yellows were probably the better option for Bailey. Should Hung have taken the 2 blues and set up 4 yellows? No, because Allan had space in the 3 slot. No, he had the yellows in the 3 slot. Maybe that's actually what Hung was supposed to do, thinking back on it, right? Like if Hung sets up a 4 yellows by taking the 2 blues, putting them in the 3 slot, it's very painful. I mean, I guess maybe Bailey takes the yellows then, because it's the same amount of pain to take the yellows as to take the reds. And in that case... Oh. In that case, Hung is hosed. Right? Because he can't take any of the leftover reds or blacks that are there. They just go straight to the trash can. So that's pretty risky. Yeah, I think Hung was just in a bad spot there. I'm not seeing a good line. If you know a good line for Hung on that spot, since we spent a lot of time talking about it, please drop it in the comments. I'd love to know what the correct play was there, because I'm struggling to catch it. So right now, Allan is actually not leading on points. 10-11 for Bailey, because that whole column's kind of got complete. Actually, things kind of turned around for Bailey a little bit. It was an awkward turn, but it was a good scoring turn. They do have fewer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 5 tiles on board to Allan's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to Hung's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, actually, that round was decent. It was a good catch-up round for Bailey in some ways, but I still think that Allan's got just the most set up. That column there is almost perfect in the 4, with the teal's going to be in there pretty easily. It's going to claim that black there. The only thing that's pretty awkward is the 1 slots that Allan has claimed are a bit divergent, but not terribly so. Hung's first. He says, I need to clear these yellows before they don't work anymore. I want to make sure that's not a problem. But unfortunately, it is going to be a problem for himself, as he needs those 2 yellows in the 2 slot, and that just isn't going to happen. So it's actually a very serious consideration for him to grab single yellow in the upcoming actions, because Bailey and Allan both can't use a single yellow. But Bailey absolutely can use 2 yellows, would be ecstatic to have 2 yellows. So to that point, Bailey may grab the yellow. Allan says, I'm perfectly happy to go first. I'll grab this teal from the middle, and let's move on with our lives here. Keeping that open flexibility. He doesn't need to do anything right now. I think he can certainly wait and see against his opponents. Although the people's boards are a little bit more open, so what folks are going to grab is more flexible right now. I was just mentioning that I think that Bailey could absolutely grab a single yellow here and set up for grabbing the next single yellow. The other option Bailey has is kind of going left on the board instead, so grabbing a pair of teals to go into the two slot and then set up for playing 3 blacks after that, I think would be a perfectly legitimate option. Since I can't see the factories right now, I can't assess how many of the blacks there actually are. I feel like we've gone through a couple, but not a crazy amount. I see at least 2 blacks on one of those factories right there. So that is a consideration. Looks like Bailey does like this plan and slots into the 2s right here. Hung's got to be a little bit concerned about grabbing a single teal, but I don't think his opponents are necessarily looking to grab them. I really think he needs to advance his board. He's not going to grab the triple teals, so he's going to be stopped there. I do think he needs to advance his leech kind of across the board that way. So I do kind of I do kind of like the 2 single yellow pickups this turn. Yeah, there's not a whole lot else I think he really wants to accomplish at this stage. His board's a little clogged. His pieces are in some messy spaces. He wants to get a red. He wants to get 2 yellows. There's only one way he's going to get 2 yellows, and it's by committing to it early, or if it kind of slots in where they put 2 yellows into play. But I think if Bailey's paying attention to that, it's not going to happen. There is an advantage in that Bailey grabbed the 2 teals, so actually Hung might not be concerned that his opponent is going to grab the 2 yellows at any point. In fact, to that point, I actually wonder if like him pushing the yellow into the middle and forcing other people's hands might be the way to go. Although actually, now that I'm looking at it, Allan would be perfectly happy to take 2 yellows, so he can't do that. Hung needs someone else to set up the 2 yellow action. So Hung just says, I'll grab the teal, not worry about that. Does set up a triple blue play here for Allan, which connects the right side of his board into the center of his board, as he just continues to get some sweet, sweet stuff throughout the way here. Yeah, I don't think that Bailey has really any incentive to push the double yellow in. So I do think it's unfortunately a little bit of wishful thinking, and then unfortunately set up Allan for this with a nice get here, right? The 3 blues are probably one of the better gets that he can have. Now, the one downside for Allan here with the 3 blues is that he's not going to be scoring the 2 yellows off of it. So he's going to have this kind of awkward, morphing up across the board thing going on, where, he's going to try to play his top columns differently from his mid columns. That's kind of one of the small disadvantages of filling out your bottom rows before you're filling out your top rows throughout the course of it. Bailey says, I want to just grab the black while the getting's good. I don't want to grab any of the penalties of the double black negatives that are out here. I could see Bailey going for those double blacks actually in row 3 going forward. So certainly some options there. And then Hung is going to set up the 2 yellow action here. I think this is a mistake. I think Allan is about to grab this 2 yellow and just have his day with it. He really needed those 2 yellows. Hung does need the red, there's no question about it, but taking a negative off of one of the double reds would be entirely reasonable. I think I'm actually surprised this isn't a snap take from Allan right now. I think he is maybe surprised to see that it's available, but the 2 yellows seems like an absolute slam dunk for him right here. I guess the downside for him is, oh no, he goes 2 blacks instead. What am I missing? Does he have 2 yellows already and I just can't read the... Oh, maybe I can't see the glare. Maybe he already has 2 yellow tiles. That does change things. That makes it so that setting up the 2 yellows is fine. Allan, knock your board so I can see the tiles jostle. Yeah, maybe he must have grabbed 2 yellows next turn and I've just forgotten. Okay, that's fair. So then I like Hung's play a whole lot more here. And his lack of concern about grabbing the 2 yellows. So I apologize for going on a bird walk there. Let's pretend that Allan didn't have those yellows and I just educated you a little bit. 2 reds for Bailey shows a lack of pressure or push here, which I think is entirely reasonable. Doesn't want to get stuck with having to take a couple extras. So I think that's a fine grab for him. If 4 blacks kind of get generated, they're fine to grab the 3rd row. Hung here. I mean, the 2 yellows, I think, is what he wants, but maybe he's thinking that he can be cute and take his time. He will ultimately be able to play only blues and teals into his 3rd row. He wants the teals the most because they connect the best, but the blues would be okay as an option. Yeah, but I think ultimately that grabbing these yellows here, I don't know, it's unlikely that either of his opponents are going to grab those yellows. I think they're actively bad for the opponents, but I mean, maybe he doesn't. Yeah, maybe he can afford to be greedy here, and I don't know that he's super excited about the teals or blues. So the question is, does blocking the opponent's teals or blues matter here? I don't think it matters a ton. I'm expecting to see Allan grab a single red at some point. Allan is getting pretty full up on the board. In terms of the 4 slot, I don't think he's too pressed. He would be happy with teals or yellows because they connect to his column over there. Reds are, I guess, passable. Hung jumps over to blacks rather than the yellows. Wow. I hate that. I hate that. What is the intention here? Doesn't want to set up 4 blacks for Bailey's 3rd column? Doesn't want to leave 4 blacks for Allan to ultimately take? I think this is too defensive. Maybe I play this game too myopically, but I think that the 2 yellows are really important in the long term. They score more points now by a large margin. They allow him to walk across the board with an action, with like the subsequent actions. They make it so that his 3rd slot could be teals or blues and not be awful next turn. Ultimately, the dream would be that he's double columning in the 1st and 3rd columns. Hung, if you watch this, you gotta let me know what you were thinking, or someone else. Maybe you're seeing what he's seeing that I'm not, but I can't not see grabbing the double yellows there. Allan, I think, unsurprisingly, takes the single red here. It just scores perfectly. He's now got essentially like that diagonal across the middle of the board there. That's just going to make it so that he's got a lot of options. Clearly, I can't see his tiles well, but I think next turn he's looking at grabbing 2 blues. That's really, really high priority for Allan. Would be content to grab a pile of teals to go in the 4th slot, the 4th row. So that's blues, that's teals. Along the top, grabbing, I think, a single black is probably what Allan is looking at next turn. So we're already talking about quite a diversity of colors along the way there. And if there's tons of blacks, maybe putting them in the 3rd column to match with those teals there. But he doesn't have to. He could instead build out onto the 5th column instead of the 3rd column. So there's some good flexibility in terms of what he wants. I don't think he wants all of the colors. So that is something to pay attention to for next turn that I'm missing. Bailey grabbed... What did Bailey grab? Is it a single black? Must have been a single black. Yeah, which I think makes sense. Like I said, grabbing the blue this turn is not ideal for Bailey. I think the single black is definitely a good get. Here's the yellows for Hung. They don't finish the 3rd row. And they're not ideal. Now he can't ever do... I mean, at this point, he's essentially acknowledged he is not doing anything in column 2. But that means that essentially he's building a column, walking across the top, but he's meeting across the top, bleeding across the top. And, yeah, I mean, the 3 yellows is not exciting. He's stuck with the yellows anyway. If he'd grabbed the yellows and then it was like red... black in this instance, instead of grabbing whatever, there'd be like a whole pile of blacks in play, which would be complicated, but not for Hung, who wouldn't need them. He would grab either the teal or the blue, and I'd grab the single teal. Allan has a couple options here. I think in the 4th slot, the teal is the most exciting in terms of the connectivity, but he actually says, I'm going to grab the 2 reds instead. I mean, first of all, it is more of them, so there is just the value of that. But maybe he's looking around and seeing that other players are not interested in grabbing reds and that he's going to have easy get of reds next turn. I think this is a flexibility take on his part. I do think that the teal is better, but he doesn't want to be stuck needing to grab 3 teals. That being said, I think Hung in front of him has absolutely no interest in teals. Bailey has some interest in teals. I'm clearly missing something that these players are thinking about, because I would have probably grabbed the single teal rather than the double reds there. Bailey knows that that third slot, ultimately they want to get 2 yellows next turn, 3 blues next turn, so just sets up a nice easy play there, and we grab a couple of negative points to end the round. If Hung had done kind of opposite earlier, that blue wouldn't be there because blue would be there because Hung would have grabbed it, but it's possible that Bailey would have had a whole stack of blacks to throw in the third slot there, which definitely would have been a better line for Bailey. All right, so I think Hung already scored and is sitting at 8 points. It's pretty miserable at the end of round 3 here, given that both our opponents are over 10 or at 10 at the end of round 2. And then Allan scored but hasn't moved the score marker yet. The mystery, they write it down, which is why you're not seeing the players be too pressed about having to move their actual score markers. And then Bailey's going to score as well. Bailey's got like this hilarious like hook. It's a scythe shape. It's a perfect scythe shape. Right? Even the like thing off the back of it. Yeah, Bailey's game has actually turned out to be much better than my kind of original conception. A very clear board right now. 2 yellows goes in the middle. 2 more blues goes in the middle. And then options in terms of whether they get 4 teals or 4 reds. I guess actually 4 teals is better because there's no triple blacks there. So options, ideally kind of walking down the middle there. 2 options in terms of oneers that score for them. So yeah, actually, I mean, and ideally the blue up there to kind of connect to the elbow, the corner. So yeah, some pretty good stuff developing for Bailey's position. I guess an outside chance of getting like a black or a red diagonal, but wouldn't really count on that. Hung this turn is looking to probably continue advancing. So a black at the top and then 2 yellows or 2 reds in the second row. Yellows are better, but if he gets a black, the red's not horrible either. So some flexibility there. Yellows to finish out the third row. And the red actually makes it so that yellow is going to score better. He really needs 4 reds in the 4 slot there. Actually, I wonder if this is what Allan was looking at, that by taking those 2 reds and putting them in the 4 slot rather than the teal that I was talking about last turn, he is going to put a choke on the reds that Hung is interested in to complete that left column. We see not a lot of reds have come out of the bag, and I'm not seeing a lot of reds in that box right there. I think we've played a surprising number of reds onto the table already, which is pretty rare. Allan, on the other hand, is looking at a black, a pair of blues, maybe like a triple teal or a triple red would be fine. Double reds, and then flexibility in column 5. Yeah, pretty good stuff there. And who do we have? I think we have Allan going first. Is that why the 1 is on the left side there? We don't need to watch this. All right, you did miss a pretty funny bit where the same commercial played like 6 times. And it reminded me that I'm supposed to give you that subscribe and like reminder too. So, okay, we missed a lot of action. Oh no. Looks like Allan grabbed 2 blues, which makes sense. We don't see a lot of blue options in play there. And Bailey grabbed 2 yellows. There's definitely like a choke on yellows, so just making sure to grab those things. Looks like that's all we've missed. Hung quickly grabbed a single black. So obviously we can't evaluate the pressure on any of these things or the circumstances. Looks like Hung grabbed first player with that single black claim. So Bailey was valuing the double yellows and also looks like didn't set up any double plays. Allan happy to take the single black here, essentially acknowledging, hey, these are the important things that I'm looking to score. And pushing more teals into the middle, which is definitely appealing for him and not really for other players. Double yellows being gone. I bet that Bailey was looking at Hung's board and saying he wants double yellows, but Hung is at this stage perfectly content with double reds instead. I do think that Hung probably wants to grab those as soon as he can because Allan is going to be pressuring them. Unfortunately, this does mean that Hung is not going to finish his 4 slot for reds for grabbing those 2 reds there. So he's got this issue of like reds and yellows wanting to go into similar positions. And this is part of the problem with the like 2-prong setup on the board usually, like that the extra like flexibility that's like afforded by this ends up being the same colors in a lot of instances. I don't know I'm sure there's a mathematical explanation for it, but I don't have it on hand about what that looks like. So we're on Bailey's turn right now. Bailey is looking to grab a pair of blues, of which there are none available. I don't think his opponents are pressing him on blues. No one else really cares about blues in this moment, so probably can wait on that decision. However, what Bailey wants is 2 blues in the 3rd slot and 1 blue in the 1st slot, and there's exactly enough blues to make that happen, but that's a pretty stressful place to be if an opponent decides to do some sandbagging, particularly later in the round. So that's a tough call, and he says, yeah, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to grab this single blue. He pushes an absolute truckload of teals into the center. So 4 teals here is pretty interesting because Allan really wants, I think, 3 teals. And Hung could afford to grab the 4 teals and put them in the 5 slot with the ultimate long-term plan of doing a diagonal, but he doesn't give it too much consideration. Allan happily picks up for a single action the teals that he needs along with a negative point. That's a really, really good get for him. I think that there's been a couple of these sort of like passes. I don't know if this is intentional on Bailey's part, but where Bailey takes an action that is good for Allan if Hung doesn't take it, but it's generally pretty bad for Hung. And it's a very, very risky to put another player into the position of like, hey, I want you to take this losing position to hurt this other player, because you can't really count on people to play in that kind of consistent defensive fashion. It feels clever as you're the player who's like setting up such a situation, but if the other person says, well, I'm not going to just like let you get the better of me in this circumstance, and it might be incidental. I don't know that it's actually intentional because Bailey either had to push in 1 or 2 teals. So maybe actually Bailey acknowledged that Hung wasn't going to take it and pushed in the 2 teals to make sure that Allan at least got a negative point along the way. So I do respect that there's some flexing on that. Allan here might take the double reds. It fills out the 4th row here, but then he is stuck with whatever's going to happen at the end. So a little bit of flexibility left in terms of what goes in the 5th slot, but there's time left in this round, which I think is not actually working in Allan's favor. Bailey, I think, has committed to the blue action, so probably needs to just continue grabbing that extra blue spot right there. Interesting consideration here. I mean, I think that Allan with a board that only has a 5 row is very prone to playing I will take a single tile to hose your action. Yes, it's the negative point, but currently Allan only has 1 negative tile, so it's only -1 point, and given the number of tiles that are out there, there's a decent chance that Allan is going to have to take a negative anyway. So I think leaving the blue on the board here is very, very dangerous for Bailey. Assuming that is indeed what Bailey takes, Hung has a couple options here. The 2 yellows for the 4th slot, kind of on that right column, but that's not the most exciting. The 3 blacks in the 4th slot for that 4th column. But again, he really ultimately wants reds, so probably filling in that 4th column is bad. He wants to leave those 4 reds available. He could instead kind of throw a Hail Mary, maybe finish the column, the 5th column, and grab blacks with the goal of trying to finish that the fifth row, third column, and maybe, you know, even if he doesn't get 4 reds next turn, he can get 4 blacks and go for diagonal. I think the odds of that are like teensy tiny, but it's certainly an option. Yeah, I don't think it's worth it to put things in the 4th slot there. I think the triple blacks in 5 column is probably what we're looking at here. He likes it too. So now Allan has the option of what he wants to do in the 5th row. I think he can take anything except for blue in theory. And looking at his board, there's nothing that he super wants. Yellows are the best for his circumstances. And if he's able to grab 3 yellows next turn, he actually could, in theory, even complete 2 columns. So my guess is that he's going to go for those yellows, but he could take a spoiler black. He actually instead says, I know I'm going to take a negative eventually, so I might as well take the negative now. And he takes, I think it was a single teal, which is a curious choice. I guess the single teal is to make Bailey's life a little bit harder, because I think Bailey ideally wants teals in the 4 slot here as their line. I guess Bailey could also take the 2 blacks, drop them in the 5th column with the plan of taking teals next turn. That's a bit of a defensive play. I think, I don't really play that defensively. And maybe part of it is because we're down to 3 players from 4 players, but I don't think Hung is my threat right now. Like, he's a 14-point player to my 19 points to Allan's 23 points. And has a bit of an awkward board. So I think that I would take the little advantage that I would have of going with the single teal over the double blacks in Bailey's position. I'm greedy. Hung's just throwing something in the trash can here. Oh, no. A single red to set up for the 4 red. I actually like that a lot more. That is the thing that he ultimately wants. It does decrease his flexibility, but he just needs a lot of points at the end here. So I think maximizing the chance that he does a full board fill next turn is the dream. So Hung next turn needs a single teal, 2 yellows, maybe something in the triples. Really could be anything, the teal or the blues if it gets to that. 3 reds, 2 blacks. That's what Hung is looking for next turn. Actually, the 2 blacks don't matter unless he gets a triple blue in the middle. It's the 3 reds that really matter. So yellow, teal, reds. Meanwhile, Allan is going to be looking at getting a single teal, a double teal, triple yellows maybe. Except for now we've cut camera to Hung, which is nice for the scoring. But it's ruining my flow, man. Oh, let's see if I can get rid of that. Triple reds. Ideally 5 yellows. Oh, interesting. Allan did not take the yellows. Basically said, I just want the flexibility. I think I'm already ahead. I don't want to get left with any huge bombs next turn. So he is just valuing not taking negative points. To me, that is an indication that he thinks he's very far ahead right now, not needing to like greed another column, but instead taking some negative points to allow himself a big setup for the future. That's interesting. And then Bailey needs a teal, 2 reds, triple blacks or yellows would be fine. Quad teals, which are unlikely, for 3 blacks, which is also unlikely. So yeah, there's definitely a ceiling there. Okay, I can see why Allan thinks they're winning. There's just his opponents need sort of the nuts to like catch up, because right now they're looking at 10, 20, 33 for Bailey, 10, 26 for Hung. 10, 20, 40, 43 for Allan. So Allan is pretty far ahead. It's basically his game to lose at this point in time. And it makes sense. I mean, he's basically got rows 1, 2, and 3 almost perfectly completed. Why are you doing this to me? I'm just gonna put my hand here the whole time. It's gonna fix the lighting situation. God dang it. We'll stand here. A little bit. All right. And who's kicking us off here? Hung is kicking us off. So no dream of triple reds on the flop here. Lots of double yellows, which is good news for him. Couple double blacks, which is fine news for him. I think the press is on the reds. Bailey wants 2 reds, so Hung has to lead off by taking 2 reds and putting them in the 4 slot. If he lets Bailey take the 2 reds, the red dream is over. The column is over. Right? There's only 5 reds in play, which I guess they could split between them, but I don't think you needed to take the yellows, Hung. I don't think he's pressed on the yellows. I guess he's pressed on the yellows by Allan, but there's another double yellow somewhere. And I don't think that Allan and Bailey are going to take double yellows. Allan really needs teals. So, okay, goes ahead and grabs the teal. Interestingly enough, he grabs, I think, the teal from the middle and the negative point. That's really surprising. I need to see blocking these freaking factories. Maybe there are not single teal spots in play. Oh, yeah. It's all doubles and triples. Oh, which is a dream for Allan. Bailey has a kind of interesting choice of going triple teal for the 4th column there if he wants to, if they want to go for a completion, but the blacks are really awkward for them, and the teal follow-up is bad. I think the double reds are probably Bailey's take here. Yeah, that's I think a nail in Hung's coffin there. I mean, if all the reds get pushed in the middle, it's possible he'll just be able to triple there. So Hung's other option here is try to get 3 blues and 2 blacks to complete the central column. The 2 blacks, I think, seem almost trivially easy here. I don't think anyone is looking at taking blues. Yeah, no one's really looking at taking blues, so I think a valid option would be to take a double black right now, and set up a blue get in the future. Instead, we're gonna grab. Oh, sure. So he needs a single teal, so might as well take it before things get really messy there, which is fine. Allan, of course, wants the 2 teals, so he was gonna grab one of the things that were in play and grabs the one that is not negative points. There's now 4 blues in play, which Bailey could claim, but is basically useless. Just a point in the middle of nowhere. The teals have become useless for Bailey. Actually, Bailey's just left with very, very few options. Blacks going in the 3rd slot are not bad. Needs a teal for the 1st slot. Yeah, the teals clustering in the 2s, 2s, and 3s. Pretty awkward for these players who are all looking for like singles. And it certainly is worth the negative points to grab the triple teals, but I don't think... Oh, I see, yeah. Bailey does need to grab them because if they don't grab them now, Hung grabs the triple teals on their next action, and Hung is just left with very, very few options left. Grabs triple reds? Oh, of course, duh, triple reds. So actually, it did worked out perfectly fine as everybody rushed the teals. Reds went into the middle. And so I was wrong about needing to get pressed on those reds. I guess that the thing is that there were 5. There were exactly 5 spaces, and other people didn't want to flex it. Everyone was concerned about those teals. So Allan will block the blues here, preventing Hung from really taking any other powerful actions to finish the game, which makes a lot of sense. I think that there's also even the chance... Oh, there's even the chance that... Allan will take the 5th blue and do a diagonal. I didn't even see that. That's dang. That is really, really, really bad. Bailey, I guess, could take 2 blacks. Hung could take a blue. Allan would take blacks. And so, alternatively, Bailey could take a blue. Hung could take 2 blacks. Yeah, it doesn't much matter one way or another. Someone, I guess Bailey decides to like jump on the grenade here. Actually could use that pile of yellows. But I think it's quite unlikely that it's going to get passed back. Hung's going to take the 2 blacks. He doesn't want to set up a 4 yellow play for Allan, so he's going to take the 2 blacks from the center because there's really not anything else left for him to do. It's too good to give Allan the 4 yellows, but I do think at this point the end score is a foregone conclusion, given that Allan is going to close this game with 2 rows, 1 column, and a lot of connected points throughout the course of the game. Bailey, I think that's a face of writing on the wall there, is going to have 1 row, 1 column, and a good chunk of connected points throughout the course of the game. Hung will have, I think, played maybe some of the most tiles into play. That's not true. Allan played a lot of tiles into play. Going to have 1 column, 2 rows, but a little bit more awkward on connected points. So I think it's going to be pretty close between Hung and Bailey, but Allan is certainly going to win from this stage out. So we only got a couple minutes left. I was going to like start clicking ahead because we sort of have this foregone conclusion. So I guess, I mean, sometimes Azul tiles just kind of like lay out in a certain way, but it felt like even from the beginning, Allan was just like in charge of this game. Curious, I guess Hung didn't want to take the negative points if it came back to him. I guess it was -3 points, but it's more than +3 points for Allan. So I think it doesn't matter, but I do think it was a mistake to not take the negative points, because the amount of positive points you give to the player who is clearly in the lead is a bit too high. So they're going to count it up. I think even from the beginning, Allan had sort of like a command of what this game looked like, the tempo, the flow, the flexibility. He just seemed like he was very in charge of what that looked like. Bailey's sort of like early, like the first turn really stymied Bailey. It turned out nicely in the second turn, but it meant that the other players had a little bit more reins in the second turn. Hung starting off and moving onto the left side of the board meant that he got stymied by not being able to grab things in the middle of the game, and that sort of meant that he had to bifurcate his board, which led to some downsides there. I'm not sure if they're going to show the score here. Let me pause and find out. All right, I thought I could find it through the power of Discord or watching this stream very closely. They do, you can see it right there, but it's unreadable. I'm pretty sure the end scores are something over the 80s for Allan, like 82 or 89 or something like that, and in the high 60s for Hung and Bailey. I want to say that their end scores are like 68, 65. So we're going to speculate based on that. I don't really know that it's like 85, 68, 65 or something like that. As the end scores here. I guess we could in theory count it, but we're not going to do that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day. And if you have thoughts along the way, I'm looking to get better at this game. So drop some thoughts in the comments. Cheers.